On this edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling, myself and Sean Saputo will talk about if the greatest wrestling match ever lived up to the billing, as well as a significant return to action on Monday Night Raw. A really big week overall in wrestling, with news of sexual misconduct allegations coming out against a litany of superstars, as well as COVID-19 affecting WWE. That's all to come on this edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. And welcome back to another edition. I am your host, Sean Meyers, one of two Seans on the show tonight. The original co-host, Sean Saputo, by way of Texas. And Sean, I kind of mentioned at the onset, this was a really big week in terms of development, both in the ring and out of the ring. There's a lot to get to. And I would say in a typical week, there was maybe 3 different topics that we could say would be the headliner. But I want to start in the ring, because really that's why we watch wrestling. We want to enjoy the action in the ring. And the billing at Backlash on Sunday for the main event between Edge and Randy Orton was ridiculous, no doubt. We talked about this last time you were on the show. They hyped it as possibly the greatest wrestling match ever. No one really believed that going in. That being said, with all the expectations, it seemed like this match turned out about as well as humanly possible given the circumstances. No one criticized how it turned out. Now, you can question the billing of it or maybe the methods, because it clearly was a taped match. But the final product across the viewers, it seemed like it was about as good as anyone could have asked for.
I thought the match was great. Again, and we talked about billing it as the greatest wrestling match ever, and the choice of words was extremely wrong in how you wanted to say that, because. And I've seen a lot of people say, when you book something as the greatest wrestling match ever, everybody kind of has their own different style of what they like to see in the ring and what kind of match they enjoy. So your favorite and the greatest wrestling match of all time, in your opinion, could be vastly different than the greatest wrestling match, in my opinion.
Right.
So the wording was bad, but I really thought Edge and Orton came out and put on a show. I thought that was one of Edge's, after 9 years, not in an actual wrestling match. It was pre-recorded, but it didn't have to be edited and redone numerous times like the WrestleMania match. I thought Edge looked great in the ring, and I thought that was one of his best matches that he's had, even going back towards the end of his tenure at WWE. I would even go back to saying that may be his best match since his Undertaker WrestleMania match.
Which I actually had just watched that match. And it's really hard to judge because circumstance is so different. This is, for the most part, an empty arena. I know they have like the fake fans now, the NXT talent, and they actually started bringing in some legitimate fans who I guess were friends and family. That turned out to be a mistake, but we'll get into that. As far as the billing for this match, there's really 2 different parts to this. One, it did what they wanted it to do, which is it got people interested because it was so farcical. It was so over the top. People said, I'm going to see, almost hoping that it would be a bad match. I think some people tuned in. Okay. It wasn't. And most people walked away, again, very impressed. Now, I would say the majority of people would say it wasn't the greatest wrestling match ever, but they might say it could be the match of this year. Right?
I would agree with that. But yet again, we have to take, and I think if there's a year that WWE needs to do away with the Slammy Awards, it's this year, because there shouldn't be match of the year candidates when we know things are being edited and things are being redone to make everything look good. So I'm not going to personally say it was a match of the year candidate. Now, if I knew that they went in there, they did one take, and there was no edits, no redo of moves, anything, then I would say, yes, that could be considered a match of the year. But knowing the circumstances of what's going on and how they're able to really fix things right now, I would refuse to say anything about match of the year for really any match from March until we get back into live not editable.
Now I will say some of the, in particular, the pay-per-views, a lot of the matches have been live. And if you look up in the right corner, it says live. That one was not obviously live. And the thing with the Street Profits and the Viking Raiders and the Ninjas, that wasn't live. So you can kind of tell, like, they'll have 4 or 5 or 6 live matches, but then they'll have some that are taped. And the reason why this was taped, in addition to them wanting to make sure it came across as good as possible, was they added a lot of effects. And I appreciate that they actually addressed that before the match started. Tom Phillips said it's fitting of a special atmosphere. So they had Howard Finkel's voice come in. They had they sort of piped in crowd sound, which I actually thought took away from it a little bit. It wasn't a big factor.
I thought it was good. I like the addition of the crowd noise because really, who knows how long those NXT,
I would say before they had that, it would have made sense. Now it's sort of like you already have people there for that purpose.
Yeah, but if you really look at that crowd, the performance center trainees, the NXT talent, all those that are in the crowd, you can just tell that they're there for so long while they're doing this filming that it's like us at WrestleMania when we went. By 11 o'clock, you have the life sucked out of you, and you're just like, God, can the main event just come on so we can go home?
Right. And the rumor was they weren't even allowed to sit down at any point. They had to stand up the whole time.
The crowd noise I thought was a beneficial ad, but I thought they overdid it. Now, if it was like at certain points where it was only like a big move, but like there were times where like somebody hit a suplex or somebody hit like a drop kick, and then all of a sudden you hear "This is awesome" just chanting out of nowhere. It's like it got overdone, but I liked them adding a real feel to it to make it kind of gave you the goosebump feeling you get in a big match, but not to the level of it actually being in the live setting.
And they also had cameramen in the ring for a couple of moves, which the one I think was a DDT that Orton was going to give to Edge, and the camera was like on the mat. That's one where they clearly had to like stop and say, hold on, and then do the move. That's why it's kind of like that it wasn't wrestled completely the same as a regular wrestling match. Maybe they didn't have to redo botches, but they had to at least kind of break stride a little bit there. Here's the approach I would have taken, especially now because everyone that follows wrestling knows about Dave Meltzer and knows about his rating system. They should have said, this is possibly going to be a 5-star match. Because then you're not comparing it. You're not comparing it to everything else in a foolish sense. Like, you're diminishing every other WWE legendary match if you're saying this is possibly the best ever. If you say 5-star, that's saying it's a heck of a match. And even the indie fans understand, like, okay, that means that it's going to be really special because Dave Meltzer only gives those out. And that would have been a better approach because you're saying it's really, really good, but it's not a superlative saying it's better than everything else.
It would have been a better approach, but it also, them saying that would have had no bearing on anything because I think if they would have went that route, Meltzer has already said at this current juncture, he's not rating anything. He is not
anything that is taped, I believe, right?
Yeah. He's not giving ratings out. Like, for instance, AEW did that Stadium Stampede, which was tremendous, but you're not going to get a rating for that. The Boneyard match was outstanding. You're not going to get a rating for that. Right. So, but, that's the thing. And with him not giving these grades, and really he's the only person that does these grades that people really actually look at, unless you're like a Bleacher Report scroller and you just want to see, what did they say, what did CBS Sports give this match, like,
But it would be something that it would have the same result of perking up the ears of the wrestling fans saying, they're putting out there that this is going to be really, really good. Let's see if it does live up to it. And I believe, if I'm correct, and I don't really listen to Meltzer, but I follow him on Twitter, I believe he actually said if he was to rate it based on what came across, he would have given it 5 stars.
I would agree. I really thought, for a 45 minute match, that from start to finish, it was clean. Because you have two guys with so much experience together, and even though Edge was gone for so long, Randy didn't have to carry the match, which I was surprised because I mentioned the last time we were together and talked about this that Randy, I had a feeling, was possibly going to have to carry this match because we haven't seen Edge in an actual wrestling setting,
Right.
And if they're going to do it this long, how will Edge last? And Edge looked great. I think Edge had.
Unfortunately, it didn't end the way that he wanted, not just in storyline purposes, but he tore his tricep. And this is where it's interesting because when did that happen? Did they know that had happened? That kind of leaves me wondering.
I don't think he did. I think it's kayfabe.
Well, I'm pretty sure they showed footage of him getting the surgery. So, I mean,
Oh, really?
I believe that they showed that. And I don't know when this match was taped. I believe it might have been midweek.
I heard it was 2 weeks before.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Edge has already had the surgery.
Okay.
So that's where I think, if I recall correctly, and things kind of run together, but I believe on Raw they showed that. Now, could they, if they really wanted to, have faked some footage? Probably, but it looks like it was legit. And at the end of the match, you could sort of see there was like a mark. But I'm wondering, was it injured during the match? Was it something that had happened before the match? If it was during the match, did they stop and realize what was going on? Just a very unique circumstance. It does suck that Edge will probably be out for a while. But let's be honest, like, it's another hurdle for him to overcome. But you don't want him wrestling every month anyway. So he might have been off until SummerSlam or even Survivor Series just based on how much they probably were going to plan on using him. But it is another setback for him. You hope that he comes back healthy. But if he came back from a 9-year layoff for a neck injury, I think he'll be able to overcome a torn tricep. And then this transitions into the next night. And we'll go back with the rest of Backlash momentarily. But I thought this was captivating. We have a new lead writer on Raw in Bruce Pritchard. And there was rumors circulating there's going to be something really big to kick off and conclude the show. And that was Christian coming back. So you get Edge versus Orton one night, and then it just transitions into Christian and Randy Orton. Orton challenges him to an unsanctioned match. Christian wasn't retired for 9.5 years, but it was 5+, I believe. And
I want to say it was about 2014.
And he had concussion issues. And we saw that Daniel Bryan was able to kind of come back from that. But you really just, you don't know. It's such an uncertain injury. And they teased it as him being in the main event. It sort of didn't come out like that because he gets low blowed by Ric Flair, of all people. Orton punts him. Now Christian's gone. What did you think when you heard this? And will Christian actually wrestle a legitimate match in the future?
I mean, it didn't surprise me. First and foremost, if that was Bruce Pritchard's start, God, we're in for a long stretch of Monday Night Raw because Raw was bad this week, in my opinion.
Well, it definitely felt different, and it felt like they were sort of channeling the past to try to pop those ratings. And you can do that every now and then. You can't do that consistently.
But really, though, how much is Christian drawing? And it wasn't a big surprise because after what happened with Edge, Christian was just on Raw not too long before.
He was on the prior week with Edge.
Yeah. So it wasn't a surprise. And then when Ric Flair was there talking to Christian and he came out, you knew what was going to happen. Ric Flair wasn't coming out to stop him. Randy Orton has been a protege of Ric Flair going back to when he came into the business, and he's known Ric Flair since he was a young kid. You really think Ric Flair was coming out to help Christian? No.
I mean, I would say as soon as Flair came out, and it was obvious when the match was starting at like 10:54 that it wasn't going to be a legitimate match. But my point is they're doing stuff, again, that I think they're trying to say, like, we need to get a little bit more star power. No, Christian's not like a household name, but I think if you said compare Christian to like Apollo Crews or Aleister Black, yeah, he probably will draw bigger ratings than those guys just because of how it is.
And this is the problem, though, with WWE right now. What Paul Heyman was doing, and granted, I still think it was just an absolute blasphemous thing that he was fired from his position. I think is idiotic.
I think it was clearly that Raw. It was pretty clear that Raw was better than SmackDown.
It was, but they fired him because of the ratings. Your ratings don't suck because of who is leading the charge, whether it be Bruce Pritchard or whether it be Paul Heyman or whether it be Vince. Because Vince just...
Well, it's ultimately Vince, whether he's hands-on or not. He's ultimately the one that should be held accountable.
But what Heyman was doing was Heyman was taking talent that's there and building this talent, bringing them in, like guys like Apollo Crews. He's building Austin Theory. He was building Humberto Carrillo. He was building Angel Garza.
Garza, I think everyone agrees, is going to be a superstar.
I think he is. I honestly...
I hope that Pritchard coming over won't affect that, but I don't think it will because I think Vince alone is a believer in Garza.
I questioned it at first. I was like, why? He was barely on NXT very long, but he's gotten better and better and better every week. But the thing is, though, they don't have top-tier talent on an everyday roster right now. They have Randy Orton on Monday Night Raw. They have Seth Rollins. Kevin Owens should be higher than where he is right now.
And keep in mind, he was gone for like 6 weeks, too.
Yeah, so they are so depleted in top-level talent because you have Drew McIntyre right here. You have Seth Rollins, maybe a slight peg down below, with Randy Orton, I'll say right now, is on that same tier because I think Randy Orton's doing his best work in recent memory right now.
Agreed.
Then you have Kevin Owens, maybe a little peg down from those guys. And then who the hell else do you have? You don't have much. So you're stuck bringing in these legends that people are going to go, oh, okay, maybe I'll tune in. And then I'm tuning out as soon as they're off the screen. Because then nobody knows who the hell's on the roster after that. Because Raw has been the same 7 to 9 people for the last year and a half. So they need to build. And that's why I think Paul Heyman losing his position is going to hurt Raw in the long run rather than help it in the short run, which Vince wants to see.
I agree in the sense that long-term, I think Heyman was heading in the right direction. It reminded me of SmackDown in the early 2000s where they just had great workers who went out there and performed well, and then they became stars. Like Edge wasn't a superstar in 2001 on SmackDown, but he became one. The same can be said for Kurt Angle and Eddie Guerrero and these guys who are great workers. They became superstars over the course of a couple years, and I think that probably would have happened if they gave it time on Raw.
Even if you look at the SmackDown brand too, while we're just talking about superstars in general, other than Drew McIntyre and maybe AJ Styles, take those two for instance, who else is superstar level talent right now in the WWE? Maybe Seth Rollins too.
I agree that I think Kevin Owens could be the face of the company. I agree with you in that regard. I think Daniel Bryan could be a similar scenario. I understood that maybe they were worried about his health when he came back and you can't really trust him, but he's been healthy almost the entire time since he's come back from his retirement. So those would be two guys that can be higher up, even though they are pretty high in the card. But yeah, I agree. There's not, especially with Becky gone, especially with Roman gone, those are, I think, in Vince's eyes, the two biggest female and male superstars. So yeah. they're definitely struggling.
To your point, they don't have what they had back in the 2000s with Rock, Austin, Triple H, Kurt Angle, Chris Jericho, Shawn Michaels when he returned. Booker T was.
I would say this: in ring talent wise, they do, but I don't think you have the characters, the charisma, and the personality. Some of that's on not allowing those guys to show it. Because Kevin Owens, to me, has the charisma and personality to be like Steve Austin. But they haven't let him fully utilize it. Nonetheless, that was a highlight from Backlash, of course, Edge and Orton. And it had to be, but it was. The rest of the show, I'll tell you what, I liked the Raw Championship match between Drew McIntyre and Bobby Lashley. The ending was sort of what I expected and had feared that it would be, which was, how do you keep McIntyre champion but not ruin Bobby Lashley? Well, you have some screwy finish with Lana, and that's exactly how it played out. And I know people weren't a fan of that. I thought it made sense, even though it doesn't satisfy you on a pay-per-view. So your thoughts on that match and what you saw from Bobby Lashley?
That was a 3 3/4 star match that ended up 2-star because of the finish in my mind. I thought those two put on a very good match. And they had put on good matches going back to their days together in TNA. So they do work very well together, and it showed that they still have that chemistry in the ring between the two of them. It was a slugfest. And that's not the style of match we've been accustomed to seeing lately.
But that's what a match with Lashley and McIntyre should be, really.
Hard-hitting, physical match. Now, there were a couple spots, like the spot I thought Lashley was going to drop McIntyre on his head.
Yeah, that was a little scary.
Yeah, that was creepy. And then McIntyre almost killed Lashley into the barricade when he hit him square on the corner of it. But other than that, I thought it was a very good match, but the finish ruined it for me. I was into that match. I was like, wow, this is actually really good. Like, I'm impressed what's going on. And then Lana came out, and I just went, well, here we go.
Well,
because don't have that right after you have a screwy double count-out finish.
With Nia Jax and Asuka, right.
Because then you got two matches that just had screwy finishes back-to-back. So, like, I don't know. We'll get into the rest of the pay-per-view here in a second.
Well, here's the issue I had is they did what they needed to not ruin Lashley that night.
I don't think he gets ruined if he gets pinned clean by Drew McIntyre, because if he gets pinned by Drew McIntyre, it makes Drew McIntyre look stronger. It makes his title run look better, and it makes.
But then where does Lashley go?
He he could stick around, but he could get another shot, because then Drew's whole thing is he wants these people to come after him. Well, Lashley gave him, honestly, a very good match. I don't want to say it was better than the match versus Rollins.
Right, yeah. Rollins and McIntyre was awesome. But, okay, let's play your scenario out. Lashley loses cleanly to McIntyre, even if it's a great match, which it was on pace to be. And then you said, well, maybe he sticks around. Well, McIntyre's probably holding this title for months. So if Lashley gets another chance, he's going to lose clean twice to him. Then he's really in a bad spot.
Well, you don't have to have him lose clean the second time. I think this is a feud that they should have done it where McIntyre won clean, but Lashley proved that, he's worthy of being in this spot. And with MVP as his voice, MVP gets him that another title shot. And then something happens maybe at Extreme Rules where they're in a match and, something happens where those two have a last man standing, but neither of them can get up because they both brutalized each other. And then you encapsulate it all at SummerSlam.
Okay. I mean, I could see that aspect, but they didn't go that route because on Monday they do this sort of bizarre, like they wanted to say that it was a championship match on Raw, but really we knew like the championship wasn't going to change hands. It wasn't even the main event. So they have Lashley and MVP tagging against McIntyre and R-Truth. R-Truth somehow like talks his way into McIntyre's title being on the line. Now, Lashley did not take the loss via pinfall, but his team lost. MVP got pinned. So now you're looking at it like, okay, so Lashley's side loses 2 straight nights. That's not great for him. And then the other aspect is, to me, McIntyre's been booked really well, and he's been like a cool face, but it wasn't cool that like he was celebrating with R-Truth afterwards. He should have beat the crap, at least Claymore R-Truth afterwards, right?
I got so confused because I turned it on. I actually turned Raw on a little bit later because I was doing some things. And it was at a point where I heard Tom Phillips said whoever picks up the pinfall or whoever gets the pinfall tonight is WWE champion. So I was like, okay, so any one of these 4 can walk out champion.
That was
in my head.
There was initially it was both Truth and McIntyre's titles were on the line, and then they changed it just to McIntyre. So it did change.
After I watched it the next day, like from the beginning, I was like, I realized what happened. But when I came in, Tom Phillips completely screwed up his verbiage and said whoever gets the pin tonight walks out as champion. And that's why when R-Truth got the pin, I'm like, wait a minute. Is R-Truth champion?
Okay, gotcha.
And then they announced Drew, and I'm like, okay, so they needed to win for Drew to keep his title, not whoever gets the pin is the person that is the champion.
But shouldn't McIntyre, after all the trouble that Truth put him through, Claymore the crap out of him after they win the match?
No, because Truth's a face.
But is that the face you want to cheer for? The one that says, oh, well, you almost cost me my title. You're an idiot, but I'm going to raise my hand with you. I'm going to let you get the feel-good pin. That's not what Stone Cold would do. I'm not saying that Drew McIntyre's Stone Cold, but think of the biggest faces in company history. They wouldn't have let that slide. And that makes McIntyre a generic face. No one wants that.
But what does McIntyre Claymore kicking R-Truth do?
Saying, don't freaking get in my business with the title again, because this means more to me than anything.
Beat up on a daily basis. It's not doing anything if Drew McIntyre Claymore kicks him.
It's not hurting R-Truth. It's making
a little Jimmy, and then R-Truth the next week's going to be following little Jimmy around the entire Performance Center.
We understand this is wrestling, okay? But let's say theoretically McIntyre lost because R-Truth got pinned. He loses his title solely because R-Truth.
Then yes, he beats the hell out of him.
The fact that it came that close, all because of R-Truth being idiotic, I want McIntyre. You don't have a brutal beatdown with a chair, but you hit him with one Claymore after you shake his hand or raise his arm and say, don't do that again. That's what a cooler face would do instead of the generic 1990s baby face. Anyway, the rest of Backlash and the rest of Raw, anything stand out, good or bad for you?
Worst pay-per-view in recent memory. I will go that
factoring
far.
in the main event?
Not factoring in the main event.
Okay.
Not factoring in Orton and Edge. Take that. I think I view that with that pay-per-view as its own separate thing. I take what was...
Yeah, I get that part of it because it was, everything else was live for the most part. And
that pay-per-view sucked. I wasted 2 hours and 15 minutes of my life with that pay-per-view. The women's tag match was a botch fest. Alexa Bliss is not good in a tag team. I think she's better as a singles competitor. Nikki Cross, they don't give her the opportunity, to keep getting better, because they have her with
She had a good match tonight. She had a good match tonight against Sasha Banks. Now, obviously, that's not same caliber, but
Billie Kay is not good. Peyton Royce isn't great, and Sasha and Bayley, they need to just, split them up finally. That's enough with that match. The Universal title match was god-awful.
That was sort of what I expected again,
I think John Morrison. John Morrison's a lot better than what he's getting right now. Then Asuka, Nia Jax. I will go on and I will say Nia Jax is the worst female wrestler in the company. I don't think.
She's obviously bad, and her injuring people makes her even worse. She's not as bad as Lana, but I would say she should be nowhere near title contention for sure.
Yeah. So and then, the Sheamus Jeff Hardy match, I thought it was good, but you could see. I don't know if you saw this, or maybe he's just really good at putting on the performance. But it looked like Jeff Hardy was sucking wind by the end of that match.
See, I thought that match got pretty sloppy. And a lot of people said, oh, that's a pretty good match. But, to me, bad botches kind of take away. And there's one point where Jeff, sort of awkwardly fell off the ropes. I wasn't really into that match. I was actually glad that Sheamus won because that's never how WWE books it. They always have, the Jeff Hardy would win typically, that type of match. But Sheamus won, and I was happy about that.
Jeff looked like he couldn't last in a long match like that anymore, though. He looked rough.
Well, it's the first time in a long time that he's been in a match like that.
Yeah, and with a bigger opponent and a much more physical, stronger opponent. But, the card itself, it was... In the Raw Tag Team title match, whatever the hell that was abysmal. That was an embarrassment to two very good tag teams. That if that was what I was put in and I was to the caliber of a tag team that those two are, I would be asking for my release papers the next day.
And I could see the Viking Raiders going that route eventually. I think it fits the Street Profits a lot better, even though obviously Montez Ford is terrific in the ring. But like the Viking Raiders, it's making them into the Ascension 2.0, where they're going to be considered like comical tag team.
They've taken the Revival spot, and it's a complete joke because those two teams.
It's a joke, but it's not like a funny joke.
Yeah. I sat there and I was like, what am I watching right now? Like, it looked like a cartoon. It was like Tom and Jerry. And then you add in an alligator tail when they fall into the freaking, like, trash pit. Like, everything about that was just absolutely terrible. And
part of me thinks that they made that and some of the matches, like, in terms of the finishes, so bad that the main event would look better by comparison.
I was going to say that. I really think now the pay-per-view, again, I'm going to go out and say it was one of the worst I have seen in a long time. But that it did seem like that. It almost seemed like we are going to make this pay-per-view suck so bad that this match looks like gold.
And it did, but I think it would have looked like that regardless. You didn't have to have some of this ridiculousness, but that's the world they're in now with, heavily edited and dramatized things. Nonetheless, we spent way more on Sunday and Monday than I expected, but some big things that came out. First, and this came up tonight on SmackDown, there has been a significant number of allegations, and I believe it started with, I don't know if David Starr was the first person who was sort of called out, but it wasn't like WWE. It was more so like the European and particularly British wrestlers who had some form of sexual misconduct. And this varies greatly because, and you and I talked about this before we went on the air, some of the allegations are for things that will be, significant criminal matters, like sexual assault, where one of these people, if the accusations are correct, they will spend a long time in prison. Other are more like crude, inappropriate, but maybe not illegal behavior, sexting, things of that nature. There's a huge difference because, the wrestlers who could be facing significant jail time and just heinous acts, they should not receive maybe the same benefit of the doubt. Although everyone, in a sense, no one's been found guilty of these things.
Yeah.
So it started with a lot of independent wrestlers. It's made its way to AEW and WWE. And the main names in WWE, Jack Gallagher, well, he was released today. So he didn't really get his fair trial, per se. And then Jordan Devlin, who is really the true cruiserweight champion, but he's been over in, I think, Ireland for like 3 or 4 months, so he hasn't really been seen. I believe they're reviewing that. And then Matt Riddle was the most notable one. And coincidentally, they had already filmed him making his debut on SmackDown. The company's looking into it. I would think he won't lose his job unless it's proven that he did something illegal and he's convicted of that. That said, this seems like it's sweeping across all of wrestling, and it might not be over. There might be other guys, including some very big names, who are at least accused of this. How do you see this playing out, and how should companies, in particular WWE and AEW, handle this stuff?
See, I don't want to make the wrong comment about this.
It's definitely tough because every case is different, and we don't know.
I don't want to make the wrong comment, and I don't want my words to be misconstrued by anybody viewing this when it, So I am the type of person to where I believe in innocence until proven guilty. I'm not going to point the finger at the females that are coming out with these allegations and say, you're a liar, you're a liar, you're a liar, that's not true, you're just trying to get publicity, yada, yada, yada. That's not the type of person I am. I'll listen to the allegations, I will see what has been said, and then I will also hear what has to be said from the defendant's party, which would be Matt Riddle, which would be Jack Gallagher, which would be...
And some of them have made statements, some have not.
So I'm the type of person where I will listen to both sides. I'm not going to point fingers and point blame and say, yeah, you for sure did it. Yeah, you're just making this up. I'll wait until the facts come out, and then I will make my opinion based on what happened. Now, I saw a lot of people on Twitter today saying, going and backlashing at Matt Riddle. I like Matt Riddle as a wrestler. I've liked Matt Riddle as a wrestler since it evolved. I followed Matt Riddle in the UFC. So I have followed Matt Riddle for years. I'm a Matt Riddle fan. Do I condone what he did if what was stated is true? Absolutely not. But I'm not going to turn my back on somebody that I have followed over one mistake that he made as a human being.
And again, the question is, would it be something that's criminal?
What he did, and from what I saw was done, it can be. It is, yes.
And that would be, I think, where Vince is going to draw the line, right? I mean, that would have to be.
Yeah, because he supposedly choked this woman and then had her perform the act. So, yes, in that sense, he should be fired. But I think, depending, if it was like sexting and, one of the guys sent a picture of, their private parts to a woman and this is what the allegation is. If I'm Vince, I'm going, don't be an idiot.
Right. And that's maybe where you get a 30-day suspension or a fine, or what AEW did, which was we'll send you to counseling.
Yeah, you're in the public eye. You can, if you piss somebody off the wrong way, somebody's going to come out with this information, and you're going to get caught no matter what. So that scenario, I think, it's like you were saying, suspension, a hefty fine, what AEW's doing with like sending them to counseling. But if it's to a serious sexual harassment, assault extent where physical harm was done or physical abuse was done to have an act performed, then yes, you need to be released from your contract and imprisoned, in my mind.
And I believe the statement that WB put out, because they don't really speak specifically, they just give like a vague general statement, was if there are charges filed, that person is suspended indefinitely. If it is convicted, they are fired immediately. And that makes sense. But we also have seen Enzo Amore lost his job over what turned out to be false allegations because he didn't go about it the right way. Rich Swann lost his job for what turned out to be maybe not false allegations, but not a conviction. So it's not uniform because Jack Gallagher's gone. He's already been fired. I think they look at him and say he's expendable. They look at Matt Riddle and say this could be a star. We're going to give him a lot more of the benefit of the doubt.
See, I don't know how much detail, though, came out with Jack Gallagher because...
Right, there's a lot. I mean, there's so many things being thrown around with so many different people.
If they fired him already and released him, maybe Jack did go to them and say, you know what, I did do this. I am at fault. I'm wrong, which is why they fired him. We don't know.
And if he did that, credit to him?
Yes. But we don't know if he went to WWE and said, look, these allegations that have been put against me, I did wrong. And then he got his release papers sent to him. Or, like you said, he could just be expendable, which he is because he's not really on much anyways. Now,
and that happens in sports too. Trust me, I'm a 49ers fan, and they've cut some guys, and some guys who are better players, they suspended.
Yeah.
It's crappy, but it's also that's how the world has been working. Now, this whole last month has been about changing the faulty systems that have been in place. And in theory, wrestling should really benefit long-term from all of these coming out because wrestlers won't feel like they can get away with this stuff if they see other people, but it doesn't always work out. It's not that cut and dry. And that's the difficult part of any company trying to sift through this, evaluating what is true, what is false, and what's a gray area.
The only thing that, in terms of the Matt Riddle situation, because Matt Riddle has been the biggest name out of this entire list
so far. Yes,
so far, it was just very, very odd that both Matt Riddle and his wife, both came out and said, this particular woman has, had a psychological passion with Matt. She has stalked him in the past.
And I think he was saying there's going to be a lawsuit against her.
He had to change his phone number multiple times because she found a way to get his phone number. They've contemplated a restraining order on this woman because of how, passionate she is for him and how much he's tried to be around him, that it made it just very, very odd that because if this was something that came out yesterday during the day, I could be like, okay, but if you look at the timestamp of this information coming out from this woman, it was in the wee hours of the morning leading up to the night that he was making his SmackDown debut. Again, I'm not saying he didn't do it, and I am not pointing the finger saying that this woman lied about what happened, because it very much could have happened. But it was just odd timing that when I looked at the tweets at 10 a.m. Central Time, and it said 6 hours ago, which would have been 4 a.m. Central Time, 5 a.m. Eastern, and 2 a.m. on the West Coast, depending on where she's from and where she lives. It just seemed like the wee hours of the morning was a very odd time for her to post this particular information on social media.
It'll be interesting to see how it plays out for sure with him. I think a lot of the eyes will be on him. And then again, we'll see if other names come out, how WWE, how other companies handle this. And you hope that you don't hear stuff like this again going forward, because it's very unpleasant no matter what the end result is. Similarly, a bad situation for WWE was what happened earlier this week. They've had an employee, I believe a NXT talent, test positive for COVID-19, and so it came out basically that they were only giving like on the surface testing, which is basically like temperatures and symptom tests. They weren't giving the true test that finds out if you have the disease, the illness, even without showing symptoms, asymptomatic. So that kind of blew up in WWE's face, that they've been holding 3 months of shows without truly even testing people. And then they had to delay the tapings, whatnot. They had also let in, as I mentioned, some fans this week who were, I guess, friends and family. They're very lucky that this actually hasn't been worse than it has been, right? I mean, it could have been really bad where, like, big-time, well-known superstars got this and maybe, we're sick from it. And that hasn't happened as far as we know, but it seems like they haven't handled it particularly well. And it's scary to think that close to 100 superstars or talent have been exposed potentially for months without real preventative measures.
Yeah, I think WWE handled it the complete, utter wrong way, but I just think to an extent, and it goes on beyond just the WWE, this is, something that in the recent weeks, ever since our country has, started to open up more and, allow people to go out to bars, go out to restaurants, go out to shopping malls, we're starting to see an upward trend in a vast majority of states and areas.
And you could speak to that personally because you're in Texas. WWE's mostly based out of Florida, and those have been two of the hardest hit states.
Yeah, I mean, just where I'm from in Laredo right now, we've had a serious spike in tests, but the only thing is, the question mark that entails with everything going on right now is, are these tests that now that people are going and there's more tests available, now the numbers are spiking because more tests are being taken, or have these, numbers come because of people going out and it's really because of that? So it's tough to tell, but it's all over every sport right now. We were talking before we got on. Clemson, 28 players or football staff members testing positive. The University of Texas, 4 hours north of myself, almost 20 people.
It really seems like major college and pro sports aren't going to happen on the time frame that we had thought.
Exactly. And with these tests now coming, I saw something today, 5 Philly players and 3 in the offices were tested positive. So everything that people have wanted to see come back right now, we're really starting to see, it's looking like it's less and less going to happen, because now that these tests are really being taken seriously within the professional sports realm, we're going to see these numbers, and it's going to be higher.
And that's why you have to question, why can wrestling still continue through this? I mean, it's very, when you think of like what sport would be most dangerous, football and basketball, there's like constant contact, especially basketball because there's no helmets involved. But like wrestling trumps all of that.
I think, though, with wrestling, the difference between wrestling and between professional and collegiate sports is, with wrestling, a lot of the wrestlers live in the Orlando area. So their travel to work is by their own transportation from their apartment, their house, wherever, to the performance center. And then they have them scattered throughout. You're not in big meetings or anything. So if they were doing basic testing, nobody had a fever, nobody was having cardiovascular issues, you're working in a one-on-one, environment, maybe a triple threat, the referee doesn't have it. So you're within an area where you're only around these certain people, but then you leave and you go home. So your travel, it's not like your travel right now is flying across country and,
Well, let's be honest. I would say probably 75% are based in Florida, but that still leaves a couple dozen who do have to come from other areas. And I know, like Edge is one of them. We talked about Edge. He certainly comes, outside of Florida. So, like, there are a decent amount of people. Remember, they were bringing Jerry Lawler in from, Tennessee, I think, right, for a long period of time. I don't know.
Been back and forth from Pittsburgh.
Right. There's enough coming from outside of the area that to me, it would be more similar to college, where, like, okay, most of them are close to that area, but some are coming from other areas, and we've seen that those numbers have been ugly.
Yeah. So I think that's why wrestling can continue, because you don't have to have double-digit people in one area at one time. You can have, the 3 people in the ring, the 2 performers and the referee. You have the 3 people at ringside doing the broadcasting. You see the people spaced out in the crowd at the 6 feet, mark. So you don't have to have, like football, 22 players on the field lined up close to each other, breathing heavily on each other.
Right,
You're not.
And I'll say for a while I thought WWE abided by that, and I think more recently they've been way looser. And even tonight on SmackDown, after the issues they've had this week, the first segment, they had about 20 superstars surrounding the ring, and then a brawl between Matt Riddle and AJ Styles that other guys tried to break up. So they, at times, I think that they've done things the right way, but Justin and I talked about this, like, either be all in or all out, and they've sort of been in between.
And I think they were trying to start being a little more, all out, because things had finally started being taken down. Stay-at-home orders, work orders, all that started being taken down. So WWE was like, you know what? If that's the case, we're going to bring more people in and bring more people in. And now with the numbers being crunched the way they are, I really think that it might go back to being there where there's no one in the crowd, and it's simply just the performers in the ring and the broadcasters
right
by the ring.
If you remember that very first show, and it was sort of surreal on a Friday night, Triple H was actually there with Cole, but it was like you got the feeling that what's that?
That was hysterical.
They literally went with like the bare minimum for how many people needed to be there, and I feel like that has gone away. But maybe they will go back to that. We'll see. Nonetheless, it should be interesting. No doubt this was a major week in terms of wrestling news. So that'll carry into next week, and we'll be back again on the show next week. But in the meantime, Sean Saputo, you could check out 5-Star Pod Wrestle, 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling on Instagram. Most importantly, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And a little cheap plug for Sean Saputo. You could follow him, Sean Saputo 28 on Twitter. Find out all the latest that's happening down in Texas. But for now, we're going to put a bow on this one. We'll catch you again next week. It'll be here. It'll be on the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling.